Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another beautiful day wherever you are. I hope you guys are ready for more orchestration technique videos because that's what I got in store for you guys for the next few weeks. Today, we will be going over the violin, the basics for it, and what you would generally need to know as a composer or orchestrator to work with this instrument and sample libraries of this instrument. This is easily one of the most recognizable string instruments in your orchestra, mostly due to its popularity, but also because of its natural use in melody lines, solo lines, and other accompaniment pieces that are, for lack of a better word, very famous in the orchestration world. Due to its natural high range and its very expressive emotional range, the violin is well known for a variety of large pieces, as well as how it just naturally stands out in your entire orchestra. Learning how to properly use this tool as a composer and as an orchestrator is very important for mastering your craft. So let's take a look at some of its basics and see if we can start wrapping our heads around it. The violin is primarily a soprano instrument, although it does have a few notes that kind of overlap with the alto range. And it is also the smallest instrument when you're looking at the string family as a whole. When you're playing it, it's held up against your shoulder as opposed to the double bass or the cello, which are played on an end pin standing upright. And when you're looking at the violin on sheet music, as you will as a composer or an orchestrator in a lot of cases, it is written out primarily on the treble clef. However, due to its very extensive range and how many high notes it can cover that extend above the normal range of the treble clef, you'll often see it written with 8 VA or an octave up marker to eliminate the need for ledger lines in a lot of really high melodies or accompaniment pieces. This makes it a lot easier for the violinists themselves to play the music, as well as a lot easier for the composers and orchestrators to read the music as well, because while you may be familiar with all of the main notes in the treble clef, once you get into those higher ledger lines, it sometimes becomes a bit harder to recognize the notes without just counting up the lines themselves. The standard range on the violin is G3 to E7, or this range on your keyboard. However, a very skilled violinist can sometimes get a few notes higher. As we mentioned in previous videos with the double bass and the cello, a reoccurring theme with string instruments is that it's not necessarily impossible to play really high notes that are characteristically out of this instrument's range. It just gets proportionately more difficult the higher you get, because the intervals between the notes on the string's fretboard get proportionately closer and closer together, and it becomes extremely difficult to play those notes accurately. Now that we're looking at the higher range instruments, another thing that we can take into account other than incorporating our higher melody lines is the use of multiple stops in our writing and in our music. Double stops are a very easy thing to perform for skilled players and can be used in the high ranges of your music. And when it's used in high ranges of your music, you don't have to worry about mud or ruining the clarity of the notes as you do with the lower range and the lower mid range of your song. Not to mention, due to the smaller fretboard and the smaller range between notes, playing double stops on a violin is not extremely difficult for a skilled violinist. Triple stops and quadruple stops can also be played. However, trying to play 3 or 4 notes at the exact same time on a violin is impossible in the case of 4 notes and extremely difficult in the case of 3 notes with a triple stop. This is due to how the curve of the fretboard and the strings goes around the instrument itself. When you're playing the instrument with the bow, you can't exactly get the bow to trigger all 4 strings at once or all 3 strings at once unless you were to apply an incredible amount of pressure, which won't give you the sound you're looking for, and it might damage the strings and the bow in the long run if you do that multiple times. So in the case of triple and quadruple stops, they can be played. However, these type of stops are arpeggiated in a fashion so that you're not playing all these notes at once, and they're instead played in a very fast arpeggio up and down the strings. And when it comes to playing harmonics on the violin, we can say the same thing in the fact that they are played much more frequently on the violin than the other instruments, especially the lower ones like the cello and the double bass, due to the violin's high range. You don't get as much mud as you would playing harmonics on a cello or bass when you play it on a violin, and the natural high end of the violin just gives it a lot more color and characteristics that make it more pleasing to put into your music itself. Touch fourths, touch fifths, and touch major third harmonics are some of the most common ones. However, touch fourths are normally the most common type of harmonics to be played. If you get a sample library, more often than not, it might be a touch fourth harmonic if they include a harmonic articulation. Meanwhile, harmonics such as touch fifths, touch major thirds, and other more unique or individual harmonics that a composer might write out themselves or that a musician might come up with on their own are not as common and most likely won't be available to you in sample libraries these days. This does, however, give you a lot more of creative options when writing in your high range though, as you do now have access to using harmonics without having to worry about mud or clarity. As always, when you're writing for any instrument, you do also want to be aware of the different qualities they offer and in their different ranges, or in this case, on the string instruments, their different strings. We mentioned in our previous videos how the cello has sort of different characteristics on each of its strings that composers and musicians will take advantage of, and the same can be said about the violin and the viola. In the case of the violin, its lowest string, which is tuned to G, is known to be its most powerful and intense string. It also gets more powerful as the notes go higher up on the fretboard, with the higher pitched notes generally carrying more weight, which is uncommon, as normally when you think of power, you think that it will get more powerful as it goes down. The next string up, which is tuned to D, is commonly known to be very warm, pleasant, smooth, pleasing to the ear, gentle, sort of like getting a hug from a friend or family member who you are really happy to see again. It is a very, very gentle sound. It's not quite as distinctive as the other strings, however, it's very mellow, and it works great if you're using it in like accompaniments or if you are writing out a harmony, as it is a very gentle sound that resonates from this string. Higher up though, when you move on to your string that's tuned to A, this area starts to hold the most potential for lyrical passages, solo passages, and melodies that are both very soft or very loud and aggressive. If you were to combine writing in the range of the violin that covers between where the A string starts and the D string ends, you'd be able to combine these two strings together for a very soothing melodic section, as the D string would carry over its very gentle and warm tone, and the higher notes on the A string would give you the distinctive melodic sound that you're looking for when you're writing a melody. Meanwhile, the highest tuned string, which is tuned to E, is a bit like playing glass in sometimes, or at least that's how it's sometimes referred to. It's characteristically bright, very piercing, and a lot of higher solos or higher trills and harmonics can be played on the A and E string combined, with the E string adding a lot of those higher frequencies that will make it stand out against the rest of the orchestra. However, despite each of these strings having all very nice, pleasing, and different characteristics that you can play with and learn, you do want to keep in mind when you're writing for this instrument that there are still distances between the notes. They are not as great distances as they are on the cello or the double bass, but there are still distances to keep in mind that the musician might not be able to cover in the speeds that you desire. Generally, if you're skipping up or down on the fretboard and on the strings in very large distances, more than an octave or two or more than a string or two in a very fast manner, it is not recommended. Larger gaps are harder to transition to very quickly for the violinist, and if you're playing a legato line where you're writing a very expressive melody and you want a fast note change of a very great distance, you won't be able to get the expressive legato that you're looking for if you do a very large jump or you skip a string. An easy way to get around this is to actually just add in a couple transition notes between the note you're starting at and the note you want to get to allow the violinist to transition up in a fast manner and not skip strings and still give you that detailed legato sound you're looking for. And extremely wide and fast jumping and skipping between low and high notes that are on very different parts of the fretboard is just generally not recommended, as it becomes very difficult for the musician to remain accurate with those really fast jumps, especially if it's a really, really fast staccato or pizzicato line. Generally, if you have something like that and it's two notes that are rotating back and forth, the best thing would be actually play them as divisi, where you have two instruments, one playing that lower note and another playing that higher note. And that way you don't have any of that awkward jumping. If you are writing in staccato, pizzicato, spiccato articulations though, you do not have to worry about the legato quality with the faster jumps if you do faster and larger jumps, because you don't have legato with those shorter note articulations, so have at it. As you can already guess or have known about as well, solo pieces in sections are insanely popular on the violin. It is a favorite for pretty much any composer that I've met, any composer that I've heard write or heard their music. And again, this is due to just its very expressive and emotional qualities and solos that it can impart into music. Normally, I would show an example of maybe a famous piece or two, but I would actually recommend just going out there, Googling some quick violin solos and professionally played melodies, because this will actually give you a better idea because there's just so many out there. And if you have a violin library of your own that has either a solo violin, ensemble violins, chamber violins, what have you, I highly recommend that you start playing with that instrument on its own, learning some of the instrument's qualities, learning what that solo patch sounds like or that ensemble patch, playing with the library to learn its best qualities and where you can use it. Experience will always beat talent in whatever scenario you are in. Well, that's going to do it for today, guys. I hope you found this video useful and informative as always. I just hit my microphone. As of when this video is out, there will only be 7, 8, 9 days until my album comes out on February 26th. And as I mentioned last week, we are going to be doing a live stream that day on YouTube, answering questions, listening to the music, doing whatever you guys want to talk about, and going from there. And stay tuned for next week because we're going to be doing a little bit with Contact. And I'm going to show you guys some basics of working with the software itself. So enjoy the rest of your week. I hope it's sunny and warm or chill or however you like it, as long as you enjoy it and have a happy day. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys. Bye-bye.